morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to episode 142 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my regular co-host, Carlo Parcelli from Washington, D.C. Greg Rosen is our special guest. He's streaming live from Chicago, Illinois. Today, we were going to discuss China, and we entitled our episode, Why China is the Future. And there's about 1 billion reasons why China is the future. But there's a real lack of appreciation of just what China has been able to accomplish. And there's so much ignorance in the West about China, deliberate ignorance. I mean, the ruling class is interested in, keeping people ignorant, and especially about the tremendous success that socialism has had, that the Communist Party of China has had. And so I wanted to discuss that a little bit. So obviously in 1949, China's civil war ended. The communists were victorious. The Western-backed proxy force had to flee to Taiwan, and they were protected there, by the West, by the United States. But China was essentially immediately, under economic embargo because, the Cold War had started and the West was trying to destroy and make life as difficult and miserable as possible for socialist countries. So, China was, at first they were able to rely on the Soviet Union for trade and expertise. And as they developed from 1949 onwards, the Soviets were at first helping them. But then once Stalin passed away, probably murdered, Khrushchev, who probably helped murder him, took power. And he was a real fuck. Like, nobody liked Khrushchev. He really dishonestly attacked the legacy of Stalin. And he just wanted to, really, provide the West. He wanted to ingratiate himself with the West, and so he was willing to shit all over the legacy of the Soviet Union, to ingratiate himself with the West. And that kind of pissed off the communists in China. That kind of pissed off Mao, and it really did lead to the Sino-Soviet split, and which again resulted in China being forced into this economic development model of self-sufficiency. So China was in this forced developmental model of self-sufficiency, and they had very limited access to things. And so they just, only had themselves and their underdeveloped country to rely on. But, with these little resources, they did a whole lot. We can talk about how the West, well, let's say this. Let's briefly touch on the main Western criticism about the Mao era, which they talk about the Great Leap Forward. Of course, they talk about this greatest famine in the history of the known universe that killed 100 zillion people in China, and let's talk about what really happened. So, when the West indoctrinates people to believe that socialism and communism is commensurate with starvation, right? Like they put famine and poverty as just a natural result of socialism and communism, and that's the idiocy that they shove into people's heads. But what really happened in China, if you go to Wikipedia, you search list of famines in China, you will see that before 2049, before 1949, they had the 2,000 years prior to that, they averaged one famine a year. So they averaged one famine a year for the 2,000 years prior to 1949, and then there was a famine in 1959-60, and that was the very last famine ever in China. Which means that within just 10 years, the Chinese Communist Party forever eradicated what had been an annual famine for the past fucking 2,000 years. So again, the idea that communists cause famine instead of end them is just preposterous. It just has no relevance to actual historic reality. But again, that's just what you get in the West. You're just indoctrinated with ignorant, false bullshit that has no relation to objective reality. So there was the worst weather in 50 years. You had typhoons, you had drought, you had all kinds of bad weather events, which resulted in consecutive poor harvests. Right in the middle of your industrial efforts. And so an industrial effort means people move to the cities and they work in factories. You're industrializing, which puts an even heavier constraint on agricultural production. So it was a bad time to have bad weather, and there was definitely famine and hardship. But some interesting facts, right? So some interesting facts. Even at the height of the Chinese famine, the so-called worst famine in the history of the known universe, the mortality rate was basically exactly what it was at the same time in India. It was exactly what it was at the same time in India, and India didn't have a famine. India is just a poor fucking country, and the mortality rate under this worst famine ever was no different than what it was in India. And it really was basically no different than what it was 10 years prior. So they come up with these famine numbers, through dishonest statistical manipulation, and they take, the mortality rate had decreased. 1949, Mao took over. By 1959, the mortality rate had gone way down. And then, of course, it went up again with this drought and the famine. And so what they do is they take a real low mortality rate for 1958, and then they look at 1959, 1960, and 1961, and they say, okay, the difference in that mortality rate from from 10% to 15% or whatever is, and then they calculate that by the millions and millions of people living in China, and they come up with these astronomical numbers. But it's just not fair. It's not rational. And again, the fact that at the height of the famine, the mortality rate was basically the same as it was 10 years ago when Mao first took over, and it was the same as it was currently in the country of India. That puts it in better perspective, and it helps people to recognize that this idea that it was the worst famine in the history of the known universe is just preposterously foolish and idiotic. And again, it's just misinformation. It's an indoctrination. It's trying to poison people's minds against China, the Communist Party, and socialism. I mean, and that's the whole point of it. So interestingly, again, that was the very last famine ever. So within barely 10 years, the Chinese Communist Party had forever eradicated famine from the face of China. Now, this whole time, after the Sino-Soviet split and you had the Western trade embargo, Mao and the Chinese Communist Party wanted to trade with the West. They wanted to do business with the West. Mao understood that China would benefit from being able to access Western markets, to access Western investment. And he lobbied every year in Geneva, I think it was Geneva, Switzerland, for like 2.5 decades. He lobbied. It was called what was that? There was 32 ambassadorial level meetings between China and the United States, and at each meeting, China would bring up, "Hey, can we end the embargo? It'll benefit you. It'll benefit us. Can we end the embargo?" And it wasn't until Nixon and Kissinger took power in the West, in the United States, that they thought to themselves, "You know what? We can't end the embargo. There's the Sino-Soviet split. We think the Soviets are our biggest enemy. We can ally with China. We can exploit China's workforce, and it'll benefit us." So again, it turns out that currently the Western ruling class is lamenting that decision, right? Because they did undo the embargo. They did start investing in China, and this is in 1971 under Mao. The whole opening up process started under Mao, and it was only thanks to Mao and his constant lobbying that it was even possible, right? Possible to access Western technology, Western markets, Western investment. but they were able to do that and to convince the West that, hey, yeah, it'll benefit us and we can do it and we don't have to worry about, they didn't think. They were naive. They never thought in a million years that China would so quickly turn into this amazing force, this amazing economic power. They had no idea. And again, and this just demonstrates the superiority of planning of a communist party identifying and navigating material conditions in order to improve the lives of their people. It's just astonishing and amazing what China has accomplished. And again, so the West never in a million years saw this happening. They thought they could exploit China's labor force in perpetuity, reap massive profits, and China would stay like India is. That's what they were thinking. So it wasn't until about maybe 10 years ago that alarm bells started going off in the West regarding what China actually did accomplish. And so you've seen there's this pivot to Asia. Obama was trying to do the pivot to Asia. He was trying to do that trade agreement in Asia that excluded China. And so that's when, you really saw the anti-China rhetoric coalescing. They realized that, their attempted effort to regime change and to do a color revolution and put in a friendly, compliant government, as happened at Tiananmen Square, they realized that was going to fail, that the Communist Party was solid and supported, and they were not going to be able to get rid of the Communist Party and put in a puppet government. And so, so they started thinking about other ways to deal with China. So I've kind of brought us quickly. I think I probably missed some things. Does anybody have anything to add to my brief history where I bring us up to now and where the U.S. is really seeing China as this tremendous threat that they've got to deal with?
Greg.
The Pompeo speech, right, towards the end of Trump, where he declared the Nixon strategy having failed, I think is a big jumping off point. That's where they said they realized Communist Party's not going anywhere.
And that was under Trump's first regime, Trump regime 1, right?
Yeah. I can't remember what year.
Yeah, and so I agree. Like, I think that's when China too also realized that this nice ride was going to come to an end, that this good arrangement, this good relationship was going to come to an end. And that's also when I think China really started preparing, because like you said, Pompeo made it absolutely clear that U.S. policy is going to change, and we're going to, start targeting and treating China like an enemy. And I remember Trump in his first term, he tweeted, and I've mentioned this before, he demanded that all Western corporations immediately leave China. He did that in a tweet. And of course, nobody listened and everybody laughed at him. But, Trump term 2, he's trying the same thing, only with a little bit of a different approach other than tweeting. He's got a little bit more of a plan. Okay. So we got some comments. So Todd is asking if I saw this debate with the Nazi. Yeah, that guy was a Nazi. I did watch this debate, and I was shocked that guy would be platformed. Like, he was just a straight up, the Jews run the world, and they're evil. that's what the fuck his argument was. It was really bizarre that guy even got a platform. But you missed it. And then Brian, Communist Party was among the first to recognize that Khrushchev was a revisionist. Yes, that's true. And let's see. Mao wrote an essay called "On the Legacy of Stalin" or something that really went after Khrushchev and just exposed him for the dishonest, revisionist, duplicitous liar that he was. Using his own words against him, etc. So, Okay, where are we going to go from here?
I would just mention as an anecdote, our visionary vice president, I say that sarcastically, recently made the statement that what we do is we send orders to China, get 700 million peasants build, and then they send it back here, and we buy them and send them the currency back there. And he called them peasants. That was very infuriating to the Chinese people in general when you see what they've accomplished in a very short period of time.
What did he? Yeah, he said Chinese peasants. What was the quote, and how did that? I forget exactly what he said, but he definitely referred to, like, we're in debt to Chinese peasants or something. And
yeah, they loan us money to buy their goods or something.
And I mean, that's got to be deliberate. I mean, he's not.
Yeah.
He can't be just talking off the cuff and accidentally use that phrase. I don't think. That's got to be a deliberate effort just to I don't know, kind of denigrate them, and so it kind of it helps to denigrate them in the eyes of his own citizenry, but it also lets them know that we're enemies. We're not friends anymore. So, okay, why China is the future? And again, I think people have a real lack of appreciation for just what China has been able to accomplish. Because in 1949, they were one of the, if not the most poor, underdeveloped, and impoverished countries on the planet, to include Africa, to include sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, it was a real poor place. It was war-torn. They had just endured the century of humiliation. You had rampant drug addiction with opium. You had rampant prostitution. You had rampant, I mentioned drug addiction, illiteracy. People couldn't read. There was no education system. Life expectancy was between 35 and 40 years old, depending on the source you use. Like, it was a fucking mess. And so if you can appreciate what the communists had to what their task was, what they took over, what they became responsible for building, it is absolutely astonishingly amazing. And words fail when you understand where they were at and what they have accomplished. I would recommend reading Godfrey Roberts. Like, for years he just did article after article, just talking about China's rise in every field, in science, in military, technology, research development, and education and healthcare. And I would read Godfrey Roberts, and he gave me an appreciation for what China has actually accomplished, and it kind of it gave me the certainty that that China is the future. Like, we're just on a trajectory that is unstoppable, and they've put in motion productive forces that the West, it's preposterous that the West thinks they can contain China. It's simply not going to happen now. And also, I would remind everybody, like I did last show, that President Putin has scoffed at the idea that the West can contain China. And he said it might have been possible 15 years ago, had the U.S. really tried hard 15 years ago and really cut China off and implemented their embargo and done everything that they might still try and do now. It could have been successful, but it's way too late. And so that's an appeal to authority. I'm appealing to the authority of Putin, but he's pretty smart. He did his dissertation on Putin, that is. He did his college dissertation on how to stabilize the Russian economy. So he's no slouch when it comes to economics and understanding what's going on. But so as far as what China has accomplished, you look at any kind of metric. I mean, the 800 million people lifted out of poverty, the wages. Let's talk about wages. So worker wages every 10 years for the past 40 years have tripled, fucking tripled in China. Every 10 years, they've tripled again, they've tripled again for 40 years. So again, like that's just amazing. And again, in the West, wages have basically stagnated during that same time frame. We in a lot of places we can't even buy as much. Like if you compare working hours to how much it costs to buy a house, you were better off in the 70s than you are now. Working hours compared to buying a car, you were better off in the 70s than you are now. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about energy production and renewable energy production. China is the world's leader. They're the number one producer of renewable energy and the number one user of renewable energy. And that's definitely the future, right? That's one of the technologies of the future that they have they're the world leaders in by a long margin. What else? Help me out.
First thorium nuclear plant just started.
Yeah, no, I've heard
Molten
buzz
salt
about
reactor.
that. I haven't researched it, but yeah, this is it's a demonstration of China's ability to invest in research and development and to put resources into experimentation. And yeah, so that's a great that's a great topic of discussion, because if we talk about experimentation, that's really what China has excelled at. They have done so many pilot programs in so many different cities and regions and counties to see what works. And in the West, you have these ideological morons like libertarians who believe that science is settled. We know what works. You downsize the government, you reduce taxes, you unleash the free market, you get the government out of the market, and you just watch the magic happen. Like that's they have this one size fits all approach to political economy, whereas that's preposterous. Every economy is different, and depending on what outcomes you want, you do different things. And so there's no settled science, right? Like political economy is not a settled science. And so China, with their housing, market, they have done pilot programs to see what works. They've done pilot programs with the special economic zones, and they've done good at it. And then other countries try and copy China, and they don't do good. They fail. So there's just no one size fits all. But the Chinese government has really done a lot of experimentation to find out, what works, and they're sincerely interested in doing those things that benefit, the majority, the working class majority. And they've been, again, very, very successful. Go ahead, Carlo.
And we'd be remiss not to mention the Silk Road Initiative. And it's China's international policy, which is not militaristic in nature. It's developmental in nature. And
so they've become the world's greatest manufacturer, right? In the 50s, the United States was the world's biggest manufacturer. And today, by a very large margin, China is the world's greatest manufacturer. And so, through their policy of win-win trade and development and peace through mutual prosperity, they're interested in exporting their developmental know-how to the underdeveloped world. And so that's really what the Belt and Road Initiative is. And they have the know-how, they have the capacity to go into these countries and build what they need, build the infrastructure, the hospitals, the schools, the bridges, the roads, the airports, the seaports, to spur development and to help facilitate in the rest of the world to do, exactly what China was able to accomplish. They have this know-how, and it's win-win because, again, it's not about a handout. It's not about China being, altruistic and just sacrificing themselves to help others. It's win-win. And so, China is able to export and these other countries are able to develop. And that is an opportunity that these other countries have not had, because the West has not offered them that same thing. The West has only offered them, exploitation, and we want to keep them underdeveloped so we can continue to exploit them in perpetuity. Whereas China's like, hey, why don't we just, develop the entire world? But the United States likes the status quo. They want the underdeveloped world to remain mired in their underdevelopment and their poverty. Whereas China has this vision of the future where it's, everybody can do what China did. Everybody can accomplish what China has accomplished, and China can facilitate that. So that's a much better vision than the Western view of, hey, everything is perfect right now, and we want to keep everything the same because guess what? Life could not be better for our wealthy elites. And that's who, our government represents, is the wealthy elites. And so they're going to, kill and die to maintain this, the level of power, influence, and what's that word when you have privilege? They're just extremely privileged, and they're going to fight to maintain that privilege. So you mentioned thorium, and I touched on it, but I don't know a lot about it. I've seen the headlines. I've heard a little bit of talk about it, but yeah, could it be that really represents a revolution in energy production? It seems like that's the suggestion. I just don't know enough about it to comment on it thoughtfully.
Did you want to say, Carlo, or?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I think it's much cleaner. The waste is much smaller, shorter lasting. I think if it's done, depending on how it's done, it can be practically permanent. Like you can, I forgot how it breeds more. It breeds more fuel as it works. So it has a lot of value and efficiency.
And it's not using
uranium.
Uranium, right? Okay.
Well, the main fuel, I think uranium's involved, but the main fuel is thorium, which there's more of than there is uranium. And it, I think, cannot be used to produce nuclear weapons material too. And it runs hotter, which allows for it to do things like desalination and I think also produce synthetic fuels potentially. So, and if you search videos, there's videos showing how it's going to transform the world if it is truly deployed. The U.S. developed it in the 50s, trying to come up with a nuclear bomber that would stay in the air forever or indefinitely. So after we developed subs to do that, we stopped developing it and switched to uranium because it made plutonium for bombs. So China, I guess, picked it up from us and has been working on it for a longer time because of its potentials.
I mean, and it makes sense. China is the world's, I think, world's leading energy consumer. I mean, again, they're 20% of the world's population, so they are the, one of the biggest countries, but they consume, more energy than any other country. And so, and they don't really produce, they don't have a lot of oil. They do have coal. They use coal a lot, but they're definitely want to have energy independence. It's definitely an interest that they're pursuing. And so they're pouring money into research and development. And hopefully, I mean, this technology could pan out and just, be a blessing to the world, right? Like, I mean, everybody needs cheap, clean energy. And if the developing world had access to that, they could quickly develop. And that's part of the ways, controlling the energy is part of the ways that the United States enforces the status quo to be maintained and doesn't allow people to break out of, the system that again only benefits the wealthy elites. But same thing with processors, same thing with technology. The United States tries to contain China. They want to cut off China's access to the most technologically advanced chips and things like that, which forces China to just invest more. And what they've done with their education system, the number of engineers and STEM graduates is just amazing. It's like they have more STEM graduates every year than like Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, and Turkey combined, right? Like it's just astronomical how awesome, and it's world class. Like they have world class universities, and they're just pumping out tons of well-educated people to work on these projects, that are ultimately going to benefit humanity. But obviously, also it's gonna benefit China. So, so the chips, they've overcome these. Again, the West is trying its best to contain, right, to limit China's success, to limit their technological advancement, and it's not working because I've been reading recently this past week or two about how they've had these breakthroughs in chip technology, domestically produced chip technology that are rivaling, the high-end Western chips. And it's just a matter of time before they leapfrog and just start passing like they have in every other metric. If you look at like a high-speed rail, there was for a while China was behind, and now anyway. So that's what's going to happen with chips because you just can't stop what China's doing. I was engaged with Michael Tracy once. He's a commentator. He's kind of fun. He hangs out with Glenn Greenwald, and I enjoy his attitude, his personality. But he's definitely not a communist, right? Not a big proponent of China like other leftist kind of libertarians. But I got into like a little bit of an argument with him, and I was making the point that even if there is the worst case scenario and there's a nuclear war between China and Russia, not China and Russia, China and the United States, and assuming that, the species survives, who's better situated to build back better and faster? Like, even if the United States destroys itself and China in a nuclear exchange, China is better situated to build back better and quicker because they just did it. Practically 1949. All you'd be doing them is bombing them back to where they were in 1949, and they could just do what they did since then, only quicker. Anyway, I'm not sure if you guys look a little bit puzzled by that, but I'm just like, there's no way that even if the West suicides itself to destroy China, China will still be the future. Is the point?
Well, I'd like to say that a good example of that is the recent flap around AI, where the Western companies demanded they have $500 billion and they can develop this AI, whereas this Chinese company, in a matter of days, came up with an alternative at a fraction of the cost. I think BRICS has a lot to do. BRICS was a very clever maneuver because the more Western hostility and exploitation of poor countries came about, that gave other countries an alternative to relying on the largesse of the IMF and the World Bank, which where most of the lending came from. And now they have alternatives, and it's starting to spring up around the world, most nascently. And what I'm most interested in following is in Africa and Burkina Faso, and they're about to. I think there's been 16 or 18 assassination attempts against Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso. But they're about to declare a Traoré Day. I hope they don't go overboard with this. But there certainly are hopeful signs as more and more countries like Iran, like Namibia, like Ghana expressed interest in joining BRICS, or have joined BRICS, like Iran, for example. But I think that's another very important development, because it exploits the violence that the West relies on to rip off the rest of the world's material wealth. So anyway,
Yeah, China very quickly surpassed the United States as, the African continent's biggest trade partner. So if you look at a map of 2020, most of the countries were trading the most with the United States, which was still very, very little. And now it's like, almost every country, China is almost every country on the continent of Africa's, number one trade partner. And that's what that's what China is about. Again, so there's no place that could use development more than Africa. And that's what China offers. And you mentioned the IMF and the World Bank. And yeah, those companies are Western institutions designed to keep these, the underdeveloped world underdeveloped. That's its purpose. And so China represents an alternative to that, which was not available to the underdeveloped world. And then, yeah, Traoré in Burkina Faso, he's seems to really be pushing, an effort to, get out from under the boot of colonialism, to have independence, and to develop, without relying on the colonial powers. And so they're very upset. They're very angry. They don't like being kicked out, and they're gonna try to, murder him like they did with the guy from a lot of people, and Nkrumah, I think. And
Sankara, the previous
Sankara,
Sankara, and of course Lumumba and Nkrumah. Yeah.
So I just read this morning, actually, and who knows if it's true. It's what people want to hear. But somebody was saying on Facebook that a special detachment of Russian special forces was sent to protect Traoré. And obviously everybody wants to hear that. And so sometimes, people will just post what they know everyone wants to hear, even if it's not true. I hope it's true. But yeah, I mean, we wish him all the best. And we want the entire continent of Africa to stand up and to throw off the exploitation and the shackles of Western imperialism. But it's a process. It's a long process, and it's way easier said than done. And exactly how, the West is going to resist that, and what kind of evil things are they going to do to maintain the status quo? I mean, we can't underestimate. And they're willing to to buy death squads. They're willing to engage in genocide. They don't care. Like they'll wreck the place. And so it's real tough to when you're trying to build something and somebody else only has to wreck it. It's a much easier job for the wreckers. Like they have a much easier time. Building is hard. It takes work. It takes time. It takes investment and planning. Wrecking shit is easier. And the United States and the West, they're expert fucking wreckers.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously.
China. Back to China.
Yeah.
What So it's interesting with the tariff war. I think what's happening with the tariffs is that at first people were confused. They were perplexed. Like, why is Trump doing this to his friends? And I think, and I've mentioned this before, but I think a broad perspective that is probably appropriate is that he's putting people on notice that you have to make a choice. You're either going to be on our side against China, or you're going to be our enemy. And so he's going to be inviting country after country, and he's going to be demanding that you don't only subordinate your own national interest to the interest of the United States and give us, advantages in our trade arrangements, but you also have to stop doing business with China. So I think that's going to be his demand. And so he's engaged in an effort, a global effort to, use the carrot and sticks against every country on the planet. Let them know that you have to join us in our anti-China crusade. I think that's what's going on. And again, there's several questions. I mean, could that be successful? Our country is gonna go along with that. And it's interesting, like, because on the one hand, you can argue, no, countries aren't going to do that. Trump's delusional to think that he's going to coerce or use carrots to get countries to go against their own best interest in such a preposterous way by cutting ties with the world's biggest manufacturer just to do business with the US that doesn't really do anything for anyone. But let's say he's successful, because in a way, the ruling class, the capitalist elites that govern these other countries, are ideologically opposed to China as well. And so they might be interested in, getting rid of this great example that, that China represents, this great alternative to oligarchy, this alternative to capitalist exploitation that China represents. And so they might be, a lot of countries might be interested in doing this thing and joining the United States and doing their best to destroy China. So the question is then, how many countries can he get, and can he get enough to really cause harm to China and to have this approach to be successful? So I've already mentioned, I don't think there's a chance in hell. I'll refer to the authority of Vladimir Putin, who agrees with me that there's no way that this effort can succeed. But it's interesting.
Can the U.S. even weather it? Right. I mean, 2 weeks, we're supposedly going to start running out of most of our stuff in the stores.
Yeah, no. So we've had an issue coming up with a topic about this actual show, and so we were struggling to come up with, hey, what are we going to talk about? Because we're kind of in a holding pattern. We are waiting to find out how this is going to play out. We're like at the beginning of this thing, and so a lot of things are going to be revealed soon, and we're going to have much more to talk about and discuss very shortly. Like you said, with what Trump has already done, how is that going to, in a week or two, start really affecting our, the prices at the store and things like that, and the availability of goods. So, but again, you have a capitalist class that doesn't really care about those things. They only care about them insofar as it makes, the masses upset.
I don't know if that's accurate. I mean, a lot of the capitalist class is involved in selling all these Chinese goods, right?
No, okay. That's a great point, and that is true. And to elaborate on that, the capitalist class, you have a lot of self-interested capitalists that don't have a class consciousness and really don't care about anything except maintaining their own, profit margins, right? And those are the people that the actual, the think tanks and the ruling elite, the vanguard party, the vanguard capitalist party, that's who they're responsible to discipline. They have to discipline these capitalists that lack a class conscience, that are more than happy to continue to do business with China. So, and that's why I think what they really need to have happen is like a declaration of war or some big event to really force these otherwise self-interested capitalists who lack a class consciousness and who want to continue to do business in China because it's profitable. You have to have a big reason, to force them to stop doing that. And so, I mean, you could see a conflict with Taiwan, a conflict in the South China Sea escalating, and, a declaration of, hey, we have to embargo China. We're going to pass legislation. Everybody must get out. So, yeah, some capitalists are more than happy to continue doing business, and they're not happy about the tariffs. They're not happy about this plan to destroy China, because China's, a big market for them, a big way of generating their own personal profit.
Yeah.
So, but they don't have power, right? Because the capitalist class has a structure. They have a vanguard party, and they're looking, and they are, they have a class conscience, and they're looking and they're seeing, hey, if we don't do something about this threat to our way of life, it's not going to, in the long run, it's not going to be good for us. We're going to lose our global influence. We're going to lose our ability to do all these things that we have been able to do for decades and decades since the end of World War II. And so, but again, so it's those people having to discipline the other people that just are self-centered and only care about their own profits. And that's a struggle that they're engaged in right now. Remember, because Trump at one point did tweet, "Everybody get out," and then nobody really listened. But that was a good point, Greg.
Yeah, I mean,
I just wanted to add that many of those companies have directly approached Trump and said this will basically clean off our retail shelves in a matter of weeks, and I think they're trying to send a shockwave through Trump. Trump does have a habit of taking something like he has his tariffs, and overnight change them, depending on who was the last person he talked to, essentially, because he has no solid idea of what's going on. I mean, the figures and the percentages, he just pulls them out of his ass. They're all bullshit. They're even the people working for them. What was it? One of his
Navarro.
I can't remember. I think it's his Secretary of Commerce said that 50% of the Chinese people.
Nick.
Oh no, that's right. It was RFK. 50% of the Chinese people have diabetes. Wow, how big of an ass do you have to have for that one? And then it was accompanied by a whole other group of phony statistics. So he's surrounded by this bullshit. He doesn't read anything. He doesn't really know anything. So to plunge himself into this kind of dire situation that's on the fringe of basically destroying the political economy of the United States, that might be welcome to some people who've been looking for that for years, me included. But boy, when you're faced with it, it really does have a frightening tinge to it. When you see how it's going down, I mean, I could have never have imagined in my wildest nightmares, after the most loaded pizza I ever ate in my life, and then falling asleep, that an individual like Donald Trump would come along, who makes who makes falsehoods and lies of the most outrageous nature, and then people rationalize or at best just outright believe them, as though they were brought down from Mount Sinai or something like that. It's astonishing to me. I thought I understood the gullibility of the American people, but the fact that he's still able to pursue what he's pursuing now and how it can fundamentally harm everyone in the U.S. Except for people who are well padded with B's before the word illionaire is beyond me. I think people are going to suffer greatly if this goes, if he rides through this the way he intends to now.
And that's the thing. So, our government has only represents the ownership class, right? So they're interested in maintaining the current system where it's a democracy, it's a government of by and for the ownership class, who is interested in identifying the interests of the ownership class and pursuing those interests. And often that's to the detriment of the masses of people. And so we can see that in every single policy, every single approach to domestic issues and international issues. It's the government pursuing the interests of the wealthy, often to the detriment of the working class. But so given that, again, if there's a little bit of pain in the United States, their only concern about that pain is that they want to make sure that the American people don't become revolutionary and don't feel pain to the point where they want to rise up and revolt. And they have so many mechanisms to keep that from happening. Number one, they have the media, which is going to at least convince at least half the people to suffer willingly, and that this will be a good thing, and that but so it's not hard. They have rendered the mass consciousness in the West so ignorant and so detached from objective reality that main fear that they have, that they're going to bring pain and it's going to cause people to be revolutionary, like that's not really a significant concern for them. And so they're prepared to sacrifice our well-being in pursuit of their greater class interests. And they don't really care about that. And so, I would caution people thinking that they're stupid because what they're doing is harming the people. Like, they're smart and they're okay with that, and they know what they're doing. They know they're harming the people, and they don't have a problem with that because they're not worried about people. They don't care about the people. I mean, that's the reality. What they care about is weakening China, and that is the biggest threat. China is the biggest threat. The domestic population is not a threat to them. They have rendered us ignorant, disconnected, disenfranchised. They've won in that battle. We are no longer a threat. The threat is fucking China. So they're going to do what they need to do to take out that threat, and they're not concerned about this. And that's why I think, what you're saying is correct, Carlo. Like, there's going to be some serious economic problems. There's going to be some serious interruptions with the quality of life that people have learned to expect and enjoy. But that's not going to be a result of ineptness. It's going to be a necessary thing to get China, because there's no way you can weaken China without hurting the global population. Go ahead. Or the global
But there
economy.
is, as our commenter saying, there isn't a coherent plan here.
So, okay, I had something to say about that. It's like, they know they need to cross this river, and they're taking it one step at a time, and they're feeling their way on the stones.
Who's the brains, though? I mean, I've listened to these people, Peter Navarro, Lutnick, that guy who says, the trade guy who says the world should be writing us checks for all the public goods we provide with our imperialism. I mean, there's no coherent strategy here.
Well, no, I don't expect these people to come on TV and be honest about their intentions, about what they're going to do and how it's going to work. I don't expect them to be honest. So I wouldn't expect that.
But you think they know? You think they have a coherent strategy?
No, it's like, no, I think a way of perceiving it is they understand that there's this river they have to cross. They're not sure how they're going to do it, but they're going to start working on it, and they're going to take it one step at a time. And that's what they're engaged in. Didn't Mao say, that's how you cross the river? You feel the stones.
Yeah, but we got Gorbachev here, not Mao. I mean, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like Gorbachev didn't understand the system he was trying to fix.
Well, again, I think we're at a very interesting time. We're at the very beginning of this happening. And I'll bet you if we reconvene in 3 years, like, we're going to see a lot of movement across this river. We're going to look back and see how far we've crossed this river. Right now, we're just at the shore, and they're feeling their way. But I don't know. I think they're clear about what they need to do. they're not exactly sure about how to do it or how it will be accomplished. But we're going to look back in 3 years and we're going to see how far they've come.
Do you think something else is going on when these CEOs such as Jeff Bezos meet with Trump's people and declare that it's going to be disastrous for their retailers? I mean, or is that, are they on the level, or are they conniving? Are they with the Trump people to make this happen?
I mean, I kind of
there is
described that
conflict among the bourgeoisie, I think.
And I kind of describe that as they're feeling their way as they go, and they had to change course. Like, they had this idea, we're going to go with this, and then Tim Cook came and they changed course. Other people came and they changed course. They put a 90-day, pause on the tariffs. I think they really did expect, people to rush to the bond market as a safe haven, and they were surprised when people started selling their bonds too. I think they expect Japan to, play ball more, and so they were surprised when Japan is getting closer to China. So no setbacks for sure. I don't know if how certain they were that their original plan was going to work like to perfection. Again, I think they have an understanding of where they need to be. They see across the river, and they're going to start making their way across the river, and hopefully they get swept away real quick and it's over. But I just think they have, as they go, they're going to get more focused, and they're going to get more competent, and they're going to get more efficient at pursuing this ultimate objective. That's my concern, and I think it's definitely possible that we haven't seen anything yet like this. We're at the very beginning of this stage, and they have plans again that involve an economic collapse, that involve an embargo of China, a violently enforced embargo on all the choke points. All that is in place, and they're looking for an excuse to initiate it. And again, it could be a couple years, because people talk about 2027. As far as when the missiles start flying.
Billy,
go ahead.
I mean, we had 4 years of Trump. He didn't accomplish any grand plans. I mean, other than tax cuts, right? I mean, does he stick to anything?
I hope I am a catastrophizer. I hope I am catastrophizing. I hope I hope the correct approach is to just laugh at the West with its pathetic ineptness and ineptitude, and that's the end of it.
I mean, I think something serious is happening, but I'm questioning whether it's a coherent plan that could go 3 years even.
But what do you think the impetus is? Like, why shake things up?
There's a crisis in imperialism, mainly, right? The U.S. hegemony is ending. That's the crisis, and they're flailing.
Yeah,
I don't see any strategy to deal with this. In fact, they're destroying all the foundations of U.S. hegemony, which is, the dollar primarily, right? They're destroying the currency. I mean, the currency has continued to go down even when Trump pulled back the tariffs.
I tend to agree with Greg. It reminds me of that scene in Apocalypse Now, where the lieutenant finally is alone with Kurtz in the cave, and Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, asks who's that, constantly quoting T.S. Eliot, but he asks the lieutenant, Sheen, I can't remember his first name, the older Sheen. He asks him, well, what do you think of my method?
Arson.
And Sheen, of course, he replies back, I don't see any method at all. And I'm sort of in the same camp as Greg is. I think there are people that wake up in the morning and they have to deal with a number of different variables, including Trump and his people, who are throwing this stuff out there, and that they're trying to keep up. They're trying to tread water, and I don't know whether they can save themselves or save the political economy of the United States, or what they can salvage. But I mean, Europe is a basket case after Ukraine. And explain the logic of Ukraine to me. Here you can turn on some of these YouTube videos that absolutely slander Trump. Oh, Trump blows a few. Trump, this is the end of Trump. None of which are true, and they never deliver. And then when they get to Ukraine, they can't make the obvious chronological switch that it was the United States that started the war in Ukraine, that's behind the war in Ukraine. They can't make, or they won't make, that obvious switch. And you go, what is wrong with these people? Now is the time of monsters. Absolutely. Now it is the time of monsters. And
but I don't think we've seen anything yet, right? Again, I think they're at the very beginning of their efforts. And I think, again, I think their efforts are focused on China. I think they have a lot of cards yet to play. And again, I mean, they've spent many years retooling the Marine Corps specifically to interdict Chinese shipping in the South China Sea. Like they've spent years to do that. And I find it hard to believe, just like in Desert Storm 1, once we have 100,000 troops there, I doubt they're going to come to a peace agreement and just move all the troops back home. I just don't see that happening. And so I think, they're inevitably they're going to collapse the global economy. I don't think that's something that is, they have to, if they're going to destroy China, if they're going to weaken China, the global economy has to go down, at least temporarily. That's the only way you can hurt China, is by, crippling global trade and choking off China from energy imports, at least for a time being. And so these are cards that the United States has put in place, and they're going to play. It's like, once you put the 100,000 troops in, where do they put them in? Kuwait. They put them in Kuwait. They're definitely going to use them before they just bring them home. I
mean, we did build up to attack the Soviet Union and never attacked them. I mean, that's what the U.S. does.
No, I like you, Greg. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right. And again, I'm just giving.
Yeah, I mean, we're building it up, but we can't manufacture the ammunition, right? Still.
Well, we've got these tech bros. What's he named his company after that sword from Lord of the Rings, Anduril or something, and he is engaged in manufacturing autonomous drones and subs, right? And so that's the future. The future of warfare is drones. It's underwater drones, and it's obviously air drones, and you can wreak a lot of havoc. You can interdict shipping lanes for a long period of time using 100,000 sub drones, just destroying everything. So
I mean, if we can't manufacture missiles and artillery, I don't know about mass manufacturing the rest of that stuff.
And again, I don't think the United States is going to be interested in invading China and winning a ground war in China. They're just going to be interested in crippling China's imports and exports, right? And you can do that. And I think the Western military industrial complex, I don't think we should count them out entirely. But I don't want to suggest like it's a winning strategy. I'm not arguing that the United States is going to be able to contain China and defeat China. I'm just thinking they're going to They're going to try, and we can see what they're interested in trying because we can see what they've invested in. And so they've invested in drone technology with, you know, a couple of big MIC corporations. I'm sure the viewers have seen the exposés in the mainstream media about these awesome corporations that are going to help us defeat China. And that's how they're marketed. That's how they're sold to the public. These awesome, you know, it's capitalism. It's capitalism showing how superior it is to the commies. But yeah, I hope, Greg, that I am catastrophizing and that there will not be what's going to happen. I mean, is the U.S. just going to realize that there's nothing they can do and accept their place among the nations and work on changing their approach to peace and mutual prosperity? Because that's what needs to happen. But I don't think it's going to happen until after they try these other options.
I mean, my theory is we should be looking to Lenin's, definition of revolutionary crisis for where the ruling class cannot figure out what to do. And that's the first step in it. That's, I think, what's happening is they're fighting. They don't have a good strategy. They're bouncing between, even within Trump's administration. You know, I mean, there was during that week where the big tariffs were rolled out, a lot of people were saying this is a negotiation. Others were saying this is our new policy. And I don't think they knew.
No, I agree. And I just liken that to, you know, they're clear about what they need to do. They're just not clear about how to get there, but they're going to keep trying and they're not going to stop. You know, what's going to make them stop? What's going to make them change course? They see they need to cross this river. What's going to make them decide they don't need to cross that river? They're going to keep trying and they're going to keep feeling their way.
Well, I think like with the treasury bonds, you know, it's too late stage to do most of this.
Okay. Hey, we will reconvene in 3 years. We will meet again in 3 years and we'll see how things have progressed. I'm a little bit, you know, I'm pessimistic. I think that the United States has some cards that they think they can play, that they think are going to help them. I don't think those cards are going to help them. I think those cards are going to be very disastrous for the entire planet, for the United States, and for China. Like, it's just going to be bad all the way around. It's unnecessary. Trump is the perfect vehicle to do this because nobody likes Trump. The ruling class is going to blame Trump. It's going to blame Trump for all the pain, and then it's going to come out the other side, you know, with the normal establishment will return on the other side of Trump and, you know, continue the policies. But again, they hope to be in a better spot. They hope that they can, through the chaos and the catastrophe, they hope that they can significantly weaken China and then come out the other side without China being a threat to, you know, maintaining their hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century, which is what it is about. They're not giving up. They're not giving up on that. But again, I mean, that's just my opinion. And
frankly, Colonel, I see no method at all. So floundering. They seem to be floundering.
Yeah.
So
no, it's an interesting dynamic. I would argue that they're at the beginning. They're just starting, and it's not clear how they're going to proceed. And there is confusion. Again, there's not like they don't have a perfect plan. They have an objective. They don't have a plan to meet that objective, but they're dedicated to that objective. And that means that, you know, these things they've invested in and put in place, like you know, all the military installations throughout the South China Sea, overthrowing Duterte, getting Marcos in place, getting this guy in Taiwan, this real rabid, independence-minded Taiwanese president, or I think they're president. You know, like, is there a reason for that, guys? Like, I think it's obvious there's a reason, and they're going to use these pieces to further their, you know, geopolitical agenda, their geopolitical ambition, which again, that's their focus across the river. We're going to cross this river and we're going to use these assets to help us. So I think that, don't mistake the ineptness and confusion for failure or for a desire to stop trying. Like I don't think that, they're
Motivation's there for sure, but coherent strategy, that's got to be there somewhere. I mean, even like think about this idea of reindustrializing. We have advanced capitalism, right? What is most of the capitalists engaged in here? Financialized capital, right? They don't want to manufacture.
Right. No, it's impossible.
So, I mean, it's not like there's a ruling class consensus to do this. He's going to be dragging and fighting them if he stays in power. I mean, I think it's
Not to
likely he
mention,
doesn't.
They
What?
can't figure out. They can't even figure out how to do it as economically as the Chinese do. And I mean, this interest. That's a very interesting question about reindustrializing in the U.S. because who wants to do the industrial work? Nobody wants to do the industrial work here. If you know anything about China, you know it's a different culture. As one individual who spent a lot of time there recently said, the Chinese workers are willing to live in dormitories. They live in dormitories with all males or all females, and they're willing to do that to get ahead in the game, to earn some money. How are you going to get people to do that here? How are you going to get people? Then you get the immigration problem. How are you going to get people to pick the vegetables and fruits out of California if you don't have that kind of exploited labor? Or, even the complaint is, and it's probably largely false, because these farmers can essentially, the larger ones, become conglomerates and get vastly wealthy. But the notion that if you paid these people decent wages and housed them decently, then your product would go up enormously in the store. Well, it is anyway. So what's your argument now? So I think there's a lot of political monsters at play here that are still taking advantage of the situation. Still think that they can come out on top and figure out how to make enormous profits out of as they navigate their particular plans and their particular ways of surviving. So you have all these corporations that are at loggerheads with each other, all these retailers, all these wholesalers, all these middlemen, all these trucking companies. One of the
Hey, by the way, truckers have to speak English now.
They what?
Truckers have to speak English. President Trump has declared that all truckers must speak English.
They must what?
Speak English.
Speak English. Oh, yes. Here you go.
I saw that on that one social media app, Telegram. Telegram said Trump has either issued a signing statement or an executive order, something like that, saying that truckers must speak English. But anyway, who knows? That's something I saw on Telegram, which you reminded me of.
That kind of fiat ultimately doesn't work.
I can just imagine they're going to be pulling trucks over. Hey, habla inglés?
Yeah. Let it rot by the roadside.
Well, and Carlo reminds me of something you said, Billy. The wages in China have gone up, what, you said 3 times, over 3 times? China's starting. What? Go ahead.
Well, every 10 years for 40 years, wages have tripled every 10 years. And they've tripled again for 4 times for 40 years in a row. Yeah.
Well, now what's starting to happen is China's starting to deindustrialize because the wages are too high.
Yeah, no, as they go up the value chain in their economy, in their production, they're outsourcing the cheaper labor to other countries, and those countries will develop. And that's that's what we want to see happen. We want to see the underdeveloped world become developed and prosperous. And whereas, that's the China's, vision. Whereas the West, of course, wants things to stay the same. They want these undeveloped countries to remain exploitable and underdeveloped.
Well, the implication, though, for us is that our wages would have to go incredibly down.
Yes. No.
To reindustrialize.
Yeah. And again, I think that's kind of the plan. There's going to be pain, and they're going to say, hey, you guys, if you want to eat, you're going to have to work for less, because there's a global economic collapse, and so I'm sorry, we just have to, we can't pay you these wages anymore. And your quality of life is gonna deteriorate tremendously. Now, but Greg, I mean, let me try and come to summarize your point, and I like it. I hope it's true. So, but essentially, you're saying this grand plan by the West to contain China has imploded before it even started, and it's done. Like they got nothing left. And now they're just gonna have to continue dealing with their own spiraling and deterioration of power and wealth, and they're gonna do that in a way that doesn't involve lashing out and trying to sink the economy even worse, trying to destroy China. You don't see that aspect happening?
Well, it's happening. I don't think it's working.
Okay.
I mean, we're waging full-on economic war. I mean, we have basically an embargo on them, other than the
right. And again, we haven't seen the fallout from that. We're expecting it to hit our supermarkets, our stores, our shelves, our prices pretty soon. We're going to have the first real fallout as stockpiles run out, and we're not getting more things that we need. Walmart will be empty, stuff like that. So no, I mean,
and the majority of Americans are precarious, living paycheck to paycheck with very little cushion and ability to absorb either wage cuts or big price shocks.
People are taking out loans to buy food now.
Yeah.
I saw a statistic on
I know. You can do a pay as you go kind of thing not pay as you go, but yeah, you can charge your food and then your fast food, and then you can pay it off in increments later down the road. It's just amazing. Now, I've always been promoting this plausible scenario where it is the United States attacking Iran to initiate this global economic crisis, because I think we can probably all agree that if Israel or the United States attacked Iran, there's a very high likelihood Iran is going to respond, depending on the severity of the attack, by simply blocking oil exports from the Middle East, and also probably attacking oil infrastructure of the Gulf states that are allied with the United States and Israel. And so, energy production and energy exports will come to a grinding halt, and that will have a disastrous, calamitous effect on the global economy. And so I have long suspected that might be how they decide to kick this off and really put it into gear, because what I think we're seeing now is just the very beginning. We haven't even started really with this all-out effort to get China. But again, to get China, you got to destroy the global economy temporarily, and a good way to do that would be to attack Iran. And so, does your analysis, Greg? Are you thinking that it is as unlikely that we're going to attack Iran as it is unlikely that we're actually going to implement this violently imposed trade embargo against China?
Yeah, I don't think either.
I like that answer. So
yeah, I mean, like Trump, I said, what?
Trump doesn't have the balls. He is not going to plunge the planet. He is not going to step up and plunge the planet into that kind of global catastrophe. He won't.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably personality-wise too narcissistic, cowardly. Plus, I don't think the financial markets will allow for it. From what we saw from the initial tariff
So the
rollout.
capitalist class doesn't want that. They're more concerned with profit than in the long-term class conscious theory that China must be defeated.
Yeah, I would say bondholders who are, having an enormous amount of power over the U.S. because of the size of our debt have no class consciousness.
Greg, I like your analysis, and you could be right, and I could be a big catastrophizer. It's quite possible. What about? Shoot, I had a question. I forgot the question, but if you say something, I might remember.
Well, there's the question of whether or not Iran is attackable. I mean, what they have on the weaponry they have, and the allies they have.
No, I remember my question, and it involved. Thank you, Carlo. Go. Let me not cut you off. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, that's it. I just wanted to say.
I was going to ask Greg. I was going to ask Greg where we stand. I know we've had 2 meetings with Iran, and Trump is talking a good talk. He says he's optimistic about getting a deal. So, do you think that's where we're at? It seems like that's your position, right?
Yeah, it looks like we're heading to an updated or modified JCPOA again.
Do you know when they reconvene for more meetings, and how long we might have to wait before an actual agreement?
I don't.
Me neither.
But I know they're rushing. Trump seems to be really rushing.
Yeah, no, he's under tremendous pressure from the Israeli lobby to bomb Iran, and then Israel keeps talking about, hey, we're going to bomb. If there's an agreement that we don't like, we're going to veto it with bombing. But I like it. So your position is Israel is subordinate to the United States. If Trump tells them not to do it, they won't do it. And Trump is interested in a deal, and he's going to get a deal, which, like you said, is going to be very similar to the worst deal in the history of the known universe, according to Trump, which is the JCPOA +1. So no, I mean,
Israel may do something. I'm not, they may have done something. There's a lot of hints that that port explosion could have been that looked like it could have been Israeli sabotage.
Russia just signed an agreement with Iran too, a security agreement. So
yeah,
and
they have
which
sent,
I think also you're right, makes it much less likely.
Yeah,
they've sent a bunch of resources, these huge big firefighting planes, to help deal with that catastrophe of the port explosion. And yeah, it does have, the logical implication is that was Israel, just like the port in Beirut. That was probably a year or two ago. That was probably Israel. Yeah, they're wreckers. They're just interested in their own tribalist, efforts to create greater Israel. And, they don't care. They'll engage in genocide, and they have been. And, there's no holds barred. There's no moral restraints whatsoever as they do whatever they can to, opportunistically, further their agenda of the Greater Israel Project. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, sorry. I mean, Iran, particularly since Raisi died or was killed by Israel, been extremely cautious and, very non-provocative.
Yeah, I mean, that's
they're not playing into any war plan very well.
Well, the death of Raisi is very suspicious. They claim it was just a crash. Iran says it was just a crash, but again, quite likely could have been an assassination. The new guy is definitely a reformer, pro-Western, who would love to just have a deal. And that would be good. Like if the West can offer Iran a deal they can accept. The talk has been that the only thing they're willing to offer Iran is the deal they could never accept, because it would be including, getting rid of their ballistic missile program, totally getting rid of their enrichment capability and stopping their support for Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. And all three of those things are a no-go. Iran is never going to agree to that.
Right.
But the threat is that if they don't, they're going to get nuked. I mean, that's the threat. And so but your analysis is that it's an empty threat, that Trump is going to drop those demands. He will offer Iran.
That's what we're hearing. Right,
Yeah.
from
No,
the
it is. It is
negotiations,
what we're
they
hearing.
have dropped those.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's what I'm hearing, and so that's the way it looks. Yeah, I'm not sure when they're going to reconvene, but Israel's angry because Israel is not happy with this deal, and so we'll see if Trump is able to restrain them, or maybe Israel will attack, and then Trump will do some kind of a thing with Iran and say, "Don't respond again." It'll be a small attack, and then just suffer it. That's played out before.
I will say that.
Go ahead. Yes.
I will say that most of the pundits that I watch, that are in tacit agreement, or I'm in tacit agreement with them, they all have military and intelligence backgrounds, and they backed off the threat of nuclear war, the fear of nuclear war. Mostly Ritter, he's backed off the most, but others too have dropped that notion that nuclear war is available. And you look around, if you're in my condition and you spend a lot of time looking at things on the net, look at the Chinese achievements, look at the achievements, the structural achievements they've made in these other countries, all over the globe. Why would you want to blow up and destroy that kind of beauty? I mean, for any reason. It's beyond my psyche. If you have a people and an economic system that can build such beautiful bridges, can bring people out of poverty, can electrify tremendous swaths of land, or turn a desert into a garden, why wouldn't you want to do that? Why would you want to participate in that? We already have 3 possible apocalypses that we have to deal with: global climate change, nuclear war, and AI. Well, I started studying AI 50 years ago when I came across the attempt by groups of scientists in California to build a lifelike human robot. And then you had earlier pieces like John von Neumann's self-reproducing automata. And you could see initially that this was a kind of heinous, very limited approach to human existence that grew out of the Enlightenment, primarily the French Enlightenment, if you will. You have, Man the Machine by La Mettrie, and all these other documents where they're attempting to make not so much mankind, not so much robots to operate like mankind, but mankind to operate like robots. So when I see a lot of these people in these high positions, like what's his face, Musk, what a turd, what a human turd. That guy is operating so much like a robot that it's like you have to beware of that, of almost a new kind of species, a species made out of metallic feces, and that it just boggles my mind that somebody would go in and think he could take a bunch of nascent adolescents, and without any information, any concept of how people the people that worked in government understood their jobs and the way those jobs were developed, and go in with like baseball bats and start beating up computers, beating up the people that work there, and this was going to reduce costs of government. It's going to increase the cost of government. First of all, there's an enormous amount of people aren't going to pay taxes anymore. There's a tremendous amount of court costs. And it reminds me of one figure I saw. This doesn't pertain to that. This pertains to Hamas. To move the Palestinians, all 2.2 million of them, out of Gaza now would cost $330 billion. Now, think about it. You know it's going to cost a lot more than that. But who would even think in those terms? Who would even think of turning the Eastern Mediterranean into a Riviera, fueled by offshore offshore gas and oil? Who would even come up with that idea? What kind of a beast would come up with that idea when you've seen such marvelous examples of, go back to the Burkina again, the Burkina Faso. I mean, they've got a new hospital there. It's gorgeous. They have new schools. This guy, Traore's only been in power for a little less than 3 years. Already, there's schools, a tomato processing plant, electrification, new roads, and you can understand why he's doing it, because he feels like he doesn't have that long to live. So he has to put out as good an example as he possibly can in the short time he has. So when the viewer called them monsters, those people like Musk, monsters. He wasn't lying. They are monsters, and so we have to treat them like that. You can never forget that.
Thank you, Carlo. I'm glad I'm not the only one getting things off my chest. We're all sharing our honest opinions, and I really appreciate it. It's been a fun program. You guys have anything else to hit on before we wrap up? We're an hour and a half in. Brian shared a quote of Fidian Cunningham: "War machine masquerades as a country whose political class and mass media are so thoroughly brainwashed as to be beyond redemption." I hate to say beyond redemption. I always hold out hope, but yeah. So it's going to be interesting. We differ. Me and Greg differ on the likelihood of the outcomes. I think there's a high likelihood things turn out bad. Greg is suggesting that there's a likelihood that it might not be so bad.
I think it turns out bad too, just not those wars. Yeah, I mean, I think all this is because we're in a serious crisis.
But are they going to lash out, by trying to impose a military enforced economic embargo against China? Because that's that, and without that happening, and without a war with Iran, where Iran ends up destroying all the energy infrastructure in the Gulf and stopping exports, without those things happening, there's not going to be a global economic crisis. There's going to be a crisis in the U.S. only.
Can't Trump do it with the tariffs? I mean, he pretty much did, or almost has.
Well, I think the purpose of the tariffs is to align the planet against China and with the United States. And when that fails, I think he might take this unilateral act of imposing a embargo with the pretext of Taiwan independence, or defending the Philippines, escalating militarily in the South China Sea on the side of the Philippines, and using either one of those or both as the pretext to, hey, we have to stop commerce. We have to embargo China. They can't have nobody can trade with China, and we're going to stop everybody from trading using the military. That's what I think is going to happen after the tariff fiasco doesn't serve their functions. But we're rehashing our disagreement.
Yeah.
And no, it's I appreciate the discussion, and time is going to tell. And that's the great thing. And I really hope I'm wrong. And I really appreciate hearing alternative opinions and discussing it. And I think it's super important. I think we need way more of this in society. Way more people ought to be interested, talking about it, informing themselves, using their critical thinking skills to figure out, what's going on and why. There's really not enough of that. And that's all by design. People, they want to render us ignorant and detached from reality. And we need to do our best to resist that. Anything else? That's it, right? We're going to go. Okay. Thank you so much. A lot of viewers, a lot of comments. We're going to be back on Friday. Max Perry will join us Friday. He's a great journalist. We're looking forward to that. We will see everyone then. Thank you very much, guys. Bye.
Thank you.